Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make homemade brown sugar Pop-Tarts. Hey Sugar Spun bakers, Sam here, and today I am so excited to be sharing another carefully tested, well-researched, and perfected recipe. This is a recreation of my all-time favorite Pop-Tart flavor, the brown sugar and cinnamon version. It's super simple to make with a homemade pastry dough, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to be making today's flaky, buttery pastry dough in my food processor because it's just the easiest, quickest way to do this. In the basin of our food processor, we're going to combine 2½ cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, and a ½ teaspoon of table salt. Now we'll just pop the lid on there and we're just going to pulse everything briefly just to get those ingredients nicely combined. Next thing you're going to need is 1 cup of unsalted butter, and this should be very cold. I like to pop my butter in the freezer for about 15 minutes before I use it, just so it is really nice and cold, which is going to, in turn, help us have a nice flaky dough. We're going to cut this butter into pieces. I cut each stick into about 8 pieces. And then we'll just scatter this evenly over the surface of our flour mixture. Now we're going to pulse everything together again, and make sure you are pulsing. You don't want to just turn on your food processor and let it run. You want to pulse everything in brief pulses until that butter is nicely cut into the mixture. Let me show you what this looks like. If you see, if I grab a spoonful of this mixture, there's still some discernible butter pieces left, some like pea-sized or chocolate chip-sized pieces of butter remaining. You want that. The next thing we need is my secret ingredient for this pastry dough, which is just a variation of my super popular pie crust recipe, and that is a ½ cup of sour cream. This is full-fat sour cream. I'm just going to add this on top. And then once again, we're going to pulse everything until the dough begins to cling together. So let's take a look at this. You can see the dough is still kind of crumbly. There's no flour remaining or anything like that. And if you grab the dough and pinch it together, it holds together just fine. So now we'll take this and we're going to turn this out into a clean, lightly floured surface. All right, now you don't want to overwork the dough with your hands. You just want to get it nice and smooth and completely combined. Work it into about a 1-inch thick piece of dough, rectangle or disc. And now we're going to wrap this in plastic wrap. Our dough now needs to chill in the refrigerator for about an hour before we can roll it out and use it. When your dough is just about finished chilling, you're going to want to do a couple things. First, preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, we're going to prepare our brown sugar cinnamon filling. For the filling, you're going to need 1 cup of firmly packed light brown sugar. We're going to add this to a mixing bowl, along with 1½ tablespoons of all-purpose flour, 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, and 1/4 heaping teaspoon of table salt. We'll mix these ingredients together so they're nicely combined, and then you're going to want to grab 3 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. We'll also be adding 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract into this filling mixture, so I just like to add that in with the butter and just swirl it around to get it nicely mixed up, and then we'll add our butter. Now use a spoon or a spatula to stir everything together until it's completely combined and there's no dry flour bits remaining. The mixture is going to kind of be like a paste, maybe a little bit more crumbly than a paste, but it should be all nicely worked together. This is looking pretty good, so we'll set this aside, and then we're just going to quickly prepare an egg wash, which we make by stirring together or whisking together 1 egg with 1 teaspoon of water. We'll just whisk this together until it's nice and smooth. All right, so by about now, your dough should be ready to roll out. So let's go ahead and grab that from the fridge, and we are going to transfer it to a clean, lightly floured surface. And I want to roll it out to be between 1/8 and 1/4 inch thick. Now, while I'm rolling out my dough, I do like to pause periodically and grab a spatula and just scrape underneath the dough. That way I'm making sure it's not sticking to my surface. If it is feeling like it's sticking a little bit, I'll just dust a little bit of flour underneath, and then I'll keep on rolling. This is going to make things so much easier for us when we go to cut out our rectangles. Now, if your dough starts to crack while you're rolling it, it probably is a little bit too cold. This is especially likely to happen if you chilled your dough for longer than an hour. If that's the case, just let it sit at room temperature for about 10 or 15 minutes before you try again. Our dough is looking pretty good, so we're going to go ahead and roll this out. All right, now let's cut out our rectangles that are going to make up our pastries. I like to use this cookie cutter just because it makes the job super easy, but if you don't have one, you can use a pastry wheel or a pizza cutter or just a sharp knife. You want your rectangles to be about 2½ inches by 4 inches. So I'm just going to cut these out and keep my cuts nice and close to each other. We'll take these cutouts over to a parchment paper lined baking sheet. And for each of these homemade Pop-Tarts, we are going to need 2 squares. So you can see I've kind of paired them off here. Now one of these is going to be the bottom layer of the Pop-Tart and one is going to be the half. Now grab our egg wash and we are just going to brush the bottom half with a nice even thin layer of egg wash. Now let's grab our filling, and I like to use about 1.5 tablespoons of filling per pastry, and so I like to use my nice handy little 1.5 tablespoon cookie scoop. Now I'm just gonna drop this in the center, and then I'm just going to use my hands to kind of work out the filling a little bit so it's not just a big mound in the center, but you don't wanna go all the way to the edges. All right, now grab that other rectangle of dough, the one that we didn't brush with egg wash. We're going to put it over the filling. And then we'll use a fork to crimp the edges together to seal up that Pop-Tart to help keep the filling from spilling out. A little bit is probably going to spill out anyway, which is why I like to line my baking sheet with parchment paper. It makes cleanup a lot easier, but you definitely need to crimp the edges or you'll lose all of it. All right, now I like to brush each pastry with a thin layer of egg wash. This is going to help make it turn a nice golden brown color. It's going to keep the exterior nice and perfectly crisp, and you just need a really light coating. We want to vent these pastries, so I like to use a wooden skewer, though a toothpick would work. And I'm just going to pierce about 6 to 8 holes in each one. We're just going through that top layer. You don't want to go all the way to the bottom. All right, now let's take these over to our 400-degree Fahrenheit preheated oven, where they're going to need to bake for about 15 to 17 minutes or until they're beginning to turn a nice golden brown color. We're going to let these cool on the baking sheet before we top them with our brown sugar glaze, but let's go ahead and start preparing that. In a mixing bowl, we're going to combine 1 cup of powdered sugar, 2 tablespoons of dark brown sugar. You can use light brown sugar if that's all you have, but I like to use the dark brown sugar just because it gives the glaze a better, more vibrant color. We're just gonna break that up a little bit to break up any clumps in the brown sugar. Now I have 2 tablespoons of whole milk measured out here. I'm just gonna add about half of that for now. We'll add more as needed. And we'll also add a tablespoon of light corn syrup, a half teaspoon of vanilla extract, and just 1/8 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Now whisk everything together, and you can see this is still a little bit too thick. I'm definitely going to need some more milk here, so I'm just gonna add a splash more milk, and then I'll whisk everything together until it's nicely combined. Now we're looking for a consistency that when you lift the whisk out of the glaze, that ribbon of glaze that drizzles back down into the bowl, it holds its shape for a second or so, maybe a couple seconds before it completely dissolves. This looks pretty much perfect, so once our Pop-Tarts are cooled, we can go ahead and we can decorate them with our glaze. To decorate the pastries, I just like to spoon a little bit of the glaze on top. It's kind of stiff, so you might need to nudge it out a little bit with your spoon. And then we'll just let this glaze harden for a little bit before we dig in. And that is how you make these super cute copycat Pop-Tarts. I really enjoyed making these at home. I hope you guys have fun with this recipe as well. And if you try it, please leave me a comment and let me know what you think, because I always love hearing from you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. I want you to see that brown sugar filling. I love these.